Hi everyone, and welcome to the ACSD Facilities Master Plan Echat. We're hoping that this type of format allows folks with the opportunity to have some understanding and get some questions answered, and more importantly, generate new questions that you can then submit to us and get those included in the next Echat. So why don't we jump right in. Thank you both for being here in the summer, Victoria and Peter. There's been a lot going on, obviously, in the district that we're trying to have a lot of balls up in the air that we're trying to manage and work through. And clearly one of the most significant pieces of work that's happening right now is the Facilities Master Plan. Not the only piece of work, but very significant. Could you talk a little bit, as the instructional leader of the district, kind of how we got here and why the Facilities Master Plan was an important part of the overall strategic plan for this district?
Sure. So the Facilities Master Plan came out at a time when we had just unified and we were starting to look across at all of our schools. We have 9 schools, 7 elementary schools, a middle school and a high school. And as we started to look at where we were headed instructionally, we started to also look at our facilities at that time. And we began a process to, as our move to become an International Baccalaureate World District started to gain momentum, we realized that one of the questions we had to answer as this new unified district in looking at becoming an IB World District was determining if 6th grade was going to be moving to the middle school, which is the construct for the middle years program, which is the International Baccalaureate program grades 6 through 10 or 7 through 10.
Gotcha. And how long ago was that?
That was 4 years ago.
So that was 4 years ago that this concept of let's review our strategic plan as a district and let's ensure then that our facilities support that as strategic plan got started.
Yeah.
Great.
So those teams worked to looked at it pedagogically. They looked at it instructionally to determine, is this a move we would support? They submitted, the work group that was looking at the middle years program submitted a proposal to me, or they concluded their study and said that yes, we would support moving 6th grade to the middle school. At the time that happened, it became clear from all of our communities, and especially our smaller communities in ACSD, that moving the grade was not seen just from an instructional vantage point, but there were also other considerations to take into account. And there was a lot of talk at that time about fear of losing a grade to the middle school and the viability of a smaller school without a grade in it, with losing the 6th grade. At the same time, we had just finished a facilities assessment to look at all of our schools as a new single organization to determine where we needed to invest our money over the next years. And previously, when we were 8 single districts, every board had a different approach to facilities management. Some districts had support for facilities, some didn't. Some had invested significant amounts of money, some hadn't. So we didn't have a level playing field at all. So it was really important to also look at our facilities and really invest where we needed to invest and have a long-range vision. So the purpose behind the Facilities Master Plan was, I think, twofold. One was looking at the district as a whole, looking at the 6th grade move, and looking at all of the implications of that move together with all communities, as opposed to just looking at it through the lens of the instructional design and the middle years program. So that was one aspect of it. The other aspect is, and we continue to look at this, is looking at the condition of our buildings and being sure that we're investing our increasingly limited resources due to our declining enrollment in facilities that provide the most resources and ultimately provide the most equity for our students.
So we have a lot of different factors happening in all of that, right? Like we have factors of, we have an instructional model that we have implemented throughout the district. We're trying to create an ecosystem that reflects the intention of that instructional model, the IB program. we have facilities that require resources that we would rather put into teaching and learning than we would into pipes and electricity. But we have to have buildings that support that, and we have a lot of them, and they're old, and they've all been managed differently. And then we have kind of a geographic issue with regards to just finance in general and how we can support that work. And so that's all coming together about 4 years ago when we started doing that.
And I'd just add, part of the delaying the decision to move 6th grade was to allow the community and this district to really begin to see themselves as one district. Because to that point, we had been all these separate town schools, and we hadn't really sort of begun the process of thinking of every student as a member of one community.
Right.
And so I think that waiting to move the 6th grade and to assess the buildings also allowed us to sort of change our framework a little bit, or get used to the new framework of the board representing all towns and all students, and the people who live in it caring about all students as one body.
You know, over the past few years, though, it's been obvious, and I think we hear it, understandably, that a change like closing a school or consolidating or some of the fundamental changes that we're talking about, it's significant for these communities, right? There's so much that we associate with our school buildings and our school communities in these towns, especially in rural America. Could you talk a little bit, Victoria, about how we have tried, or how the board has tried to get an understanding of how the community is feeling, or the important components of consideration when we think about this plan, or where are you getting your data from? How does that work?
I'd say that there's a lot. It's constant data gathering, right? Just as being an elected member of a board, people come to you. They send emails. They're constantly updating you, whether they know it or not, but with questions or comments or reflection on things that are going on in the district. So I'd say, just as a nature of the beast, it's constantly a situation of data gathering. But more specifically, I think the board learns about this community, and the tradition of the board learning about this community and interacting in this community, in recent history started with the strategic plan and bringing people together to help vision or envision where the district's going. That led to IB, where again we brought together community members, teachers, administrators, to really hear about the struggles, challenges with the IB process. Board members attend school events, school gatherings. We get monthly updates from each one of the principals on what's going on in their school. What are their challenges? What are their successes? What does day-to-day look like? We attend days of learning. I'm trying to think what else. And of course, we receive guidance and expertise where we ourselves don't have it from our administrators.
And when you think about some of the analysis that has happened over the last couple of years, some folks, I think, probably feel like we haven't done enough to get the community to be part of this process, and that now we're in a situation with COVID that we were even challenged to a greater extent in having the community be part of this process. Could you both talk a little bit about why now we all feel it's so important that we continue moving forward rather than taking a pause and not moving forward?
So, I think that's a great question, and I think it's something I've heard the board talking about endlessly, in terms of how do we better engage, and I think it's like teaching and learning. I think it's continual improvement. I think you never rest and say, yeah, we've got it. We're always trying to do a better job at that. And I think there's a lot of work left to do. I'm excited about everything that's been talked about recently in terms of kind of this next phase of community outreach. In thinking about kind of why now, one of the things that we've been looking at and we're somewhat concerned about is the financial picture that's coming and the need to continue to be proactive as opposed to reactive in our response. Thinking back a couple of years ago when we did our first community dialogue, we spent about a year building the facilities master planning process. We then went out and did 2 big community dialogues in the second year. And in that first one, that was one of the things that we talked about is the importance of coming from a proactive stance. And knowing what we know about what's happening across the country right now, talking with state level legislators and others, it's clear that we're going to see a pretty significant decline in state revenue from the pandemic. That's one piece of it. The other piece of it, I think, is continuing to look ahead and not work from a year-by-year basis, which is the status quo of a lot of school boards, but instead to try to really kind of like be thoughtful around segmenting kind of limited resources and really channeling those and not doing that based on every year looking at what we get from the state and then quickly rushing in 1 month. We have 1 month to figure out what we're doing. And that's not enough time to engage the community. It's not enough time to work with staff and have everybody building towards the future. Building towards the future has to happen when there sometimes isn't the pressure to do something right now, but it's looking ahead and knowing that it's coming and starting that process before it's a must.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things and we're working towards this from a communication standpoint, it's super important for us to do a better job of talking about the benefits of this work, right? That this isn't just a punishment because we have declining enrollment and we have a pandemic and we have all of these external factors that we can't control. This is us taking hold of our community and taking hold of our educational system and saying, this is how we want to move forward, and that there's positive outcomes as a result of that. Could you talk a little bit quickly about what you think how you would characterize the buckets of what those positive outcomes will look like?
I mean, I think they're going to continue to grow. So I don't think we're working towards one kind of, it's going to stop at one time. I think it's going to be ongoing. You know, what we've seen from unification, from becoming one district, has been pretty significant when you look at what we've accomplished since that time. When I look at not just our move to international baccalaureate and what I see happening in classrooms and what I see happening, you know, with students and the shifts that I'm seeing in terms of the culture of our schools, I'm also seeing like changes in terms of how we communicate together, how we collaborate. We're more connected and cohesive. As we do that, and as we become closer together, one of the things that has come up from the very beginning is looking at what my school has and what another school has and making comparisons to say, well, they have this much of that, we only have this much of that. And so I think we've been in a process of trying to determine how do we get the most resources we can. So, you know, coming back to this equity lens that we're constantly coming back to, how do we get the most resources to the most students and provide the greatest opportunity for students? One of our challenges currently, and one of the things that we would benefit from in where we're headed, is increasing staffing for students and providing more resources because of scale. And that's one of the tensions and challenges of this is, you know, when you have very few students across many schools, that gets more challenging to offer those resources all the time.
You know, one of the things that I think is important, and there's going to be more information out there with regards to the benefits from an educational perspective. We're going to do another Echat on that to dedicate time to that. But I do think this format, one of the things we're trying to accomplish is to clarify, because there's so much information out there, or where there's a void we fill in. So it's an opportunity for us to clarify some of that. And so I'm going to ask you some questions, and hopefully you can help provide some clarification on some of these points. And they might seem random in nature, but we'll go with it. One of the big issues that we hear folks that they're worried about is transportation. And there's been conversation out there that the board doesn't care about transportation, or that this is going to result in an hour and a half or hour and 45-minute bus rides for first graders. Victoria, talk from a board perspective in the Facilities Master Plan. Do you feel transportation is an important component of this, and how are you thinking about it?
Absolutely. We have heard community loud and clear that transportation is something they're concerned about. I think that it stems in part from our transportation currently. Some kids are on the bus for a long time, and we need to be better at strategizing our routes and creating, shorter bus times. When we're talking about transportation and the Facilities Master Plan, we have hired an outside consultant to look at, the map of where actual students live and where families in this community live, and what those ride times would be, and to help us really maximize our ability to use the whole district in bus routes and not keep them just town routes, because from what the experts say, that'll help us decrease time. So that is definitely something that we're looking at. I think we're not quite at the point. Coming out of today's Facilities Master Plan, we talked about next steps in the modeling, and we're going to begin talking about, so what is it that we need to figure out the boundaries and to figure out about school choice. And so when we have what specific students are going where, obviously we'll be better able to talk in the minutia of actually how many minutes it'll all take. But right now we've been talking in generalizations, and so far from what we've heard from the consultant, the ride times with the plan, the modeling that we've done, are less than they are currently.
My dad always used to say to me, Mary Jo, demonstrate, don't declare. And this idea that it's one thing to just say things, but it's another thing to demonstrate it. And we've been talking a lot about equity, but there's this other idea out there that I think folks believe, based upon how they've interpreted or read the Truex Collins report, that we're talking about equity, and yet our plan is to take two schools that have one of the highest percentage of free and reduced lunch and just put those kids together, and then that's a new school. Is that the intention of this work?
No. No. I think we talked about this today in our facilities committee meeting. We currently have a lot of socioeconomic stratification across our towns. So having a school that draws from potentially 3 different towns, probably would be drawing from 3 different towns. If you look at, drawing boundaries around 3 different schools and proximity of other towns, you're looking at shifting some of that stratification and creating kind of more diversity of in terms of socioeconomic status.
Certainly one of the goals is to have kids sitting in classrooms with other kids who have different life experiences. That is the diversity that we can find in this district, and so we need to really maximize that, and we're going to be thoughtful about where we draw students from so that we can create those learning communities.
I guess the last question is kind of, where do we go from here? Like, what are next steps? There's so much on
I was going to ask you that.
There's so much on people's shoulders right now, and to have people worrying about a change such as this happening this September, we should alleviate that concern, because that's a lot of this work is not going to happen in this September. So how can we help folks understand, just from a process perspective, the Facilities Master Plan Committee and the things that still have to happen?
A lot still has to happen.
Yeah.
We've talked about having a plan together, something, you know, that is able to be publicly consumed by town meeting day in March. So this work is ongoing. Initially we talked about the three-legged stool, and we've looked seriously at the facilities piece. We're very much engaged in the educational piece, but we gotta get the three legs together to complete the plan. I would say in terms of when the implementation would happen, we've talked about 2022. We've talked about retaining the right to delay that and to hurry it up, depending on what kind of financial crunch we find ourselves in at a state level and thus at a school level.
So at least the next step is folks should be comfortable in knowing that there will be an opportunity for review of a draft plan prior to town meeting,
Yes.
that there's more input that's going to be happening. We're going to be talking more, and you'll hear more about things like porch conversations and more e-chats and front porch forums and better website, blah, all that stuff. And then we're going to get to a point where we're going to have to talk and turn to the experts around an appropriate implementation strategy, just like we did for when we moved the sixth grade.
Mm-hmm.
And the educators said, wait a second, we need a couple years to do that.
Right.
And I would assume that that would be a plan for something like this as well.
That's what I assume as well.
Finally then, I guess, you know, is there anything that you could take a step back and say to the community that you hope that they think about, or ways that they can get involved that we would all find, you know, hopeful and beneficial and help us be better at what we're doing from a board and a district leadership perspective?
I think helping us to reach out to other folks in their communities to be part of the process. One thing that we've talked about over the years is wanting to reach others in the community. We hear from a small group of community members often, and it would be great if the community could be working within their communities to kind of bring more people into this conversation. These are our schools, these are our students, it's our community.
And that includes, you know, folks who don't have kids, and that includes
Absolutely.
a wide stratification of those folks who are Vermonters and living in Addison County and living in our community. And I think it's really important that we find ways to get those voices to be part of this as well.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the porch conversations, and I think that those who sign up to host those events, that I hope they rise to the challenge of really reaching out to the people within their communities, to bring them to the outside table, to have questions answered and to hear what's going on in the district.
Great. Well, thank you both for taking the time. We're going to keep getting better at this stuff. We're going to keep getting better at the way that we communicate and the opportunities that we have to engage with the community. And, you know, as chair of the board, there is no question in my mind that the folks who are thinking through this have intentions and the will and courage to do this in a way that is, at the end of the day, is best for our kids. And it's been great to be part of that process. And so thank you all for all that you're doing in times that are unprecedented. We really appreciate it. For all you watching, thank you very much. We'll make sure that you have access to a URL that you can continue to access e-chats and other information that the board and the district community is putting out there. And please, again, stay involved, reach out, and be part of the process. Thank you very much and have a great day.